They say the stage is the safest place for a performer, where the lights shine, the crowd roars, and the show must always go on. But what happens when that spotlight becomes the very last thing they ever see? Have you ever wondered what it feels like when life and art collide in the most chilling way possible? Stay with us, because what follows are stories that will leave you stunned, and maybe even afraid of the curtain call. Tommy Cooper. Imagine thousands of people laughing, thinking they were watching comedy gold, when in reality, they were witnessing a man's final moments. That's exactly what happened to British comedian and magician Tommy Cooper on April 15, 1984. Known for his red fez hat and bumbling stage persona, Cooper had built a career out of making mistakes look hilarious. But during a live television variety show, those stage stumbles became frighteningly real. As Cooper began a routine, he suddenly collapsed to the floor. At first, the audience erupted with laughter, convinced it was part of his act. His reputation for slapstick humor made it impossible to tell where the joke ended and reality began. Even the hosts hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. Meanwhile, the cameras kept rolling. Millions at home were left watching, chuckling nervously, until the horrifying truth settled in. This was no gag. Stagehands rushed to pull the curtain, scrambling to revive him behind the scenes. But the surreal moment had already been broadcast across Britain, cementing it as one of television's most unforgettable tragedies. Cooper had given everything to comedy, even his last breath. The cultural impact was enormous. Audiences who grew up with his clumsy charm couldn't believe they had laughed through his farewell. To this day, Cooper's final performance is discussed not just as a tragedy, but as a haunting reminder of how closely comedy and catastrophe can overlap. In the end, Tommy Cooper left the world doing what he loved, entertaining. But the eerie twist, he made people laugh even as he slipped away. Dick Shawn. When the audience laughs as you collapse, you know your reputation has become larger than life. Comedian and actor Dick Shawn, best remembered as the eccentric hippie Lorenzo in The Producers, built his career on the unexpected. His routines thrived on chaos, surreal energy, and the kind of unpredictable humor that kept crowds guessing whether he was joking or serious. On April 17, 1987, while performing in San Diego, Shawn launched into a routine about nuclear war. Playing a manic politician giving a rambling speech, he suddenly crumpled to the stage. The audience burst into laughter, convinced it was another one of his brilliantly bizarre gags. He stayed down, silent. Still, the laughter rolled on. Some whispered, "Classic Dick," the man who always turned the absurd into comedy gold. Minutes slipped by before unease crept in. Finally, a man climbed on stage to check, and the illusion collapsed into horror. Shawn was gone, mid-act. The tragedy was shocking not only because of its suddenness, but also because it perfectly mirrored his style. For decades, Shawn had blurred the line between staged accident and real-life chaos. That night, the line vanished altogether, leaving fans shaken and guilty for having laughed through his final moments. His passing became one of the most infamous stories in stand-up history, a reminder of the fragile line between art and reality. For Dick Shawn, the cruel irony was inescapable. His last act was so convincing, audiences thought his death was just another punchline. Red Fox. Some performances mirror a career's most famous gag in the cruelest way possible. Television legend Red Fox, beloved for his role in Sanford and Son, became iconic for his exaggerated chest-grabbing routine. His character, Fred Sanford, would stumble, clutch his chest, and cry out, "I'm coming, Elizabeth," a running joke that delighted audiences for years. Ironically, that very act would later shadow his real-life end. On October 11, 1991, while rehearsing for his then-new sitcom, The Royal Family, Fox suddenly collapsed on set. Instinctively, the cast and crew burst into laughter. To them, this was classic Red, rehearsing an old gag or adding humor to lighten the mood. But as seconds turned into silence, the atmosphere shifted. Realization dawned. This wasn't a routine, it was terrifyingly real. Paramedics were called, and the scene descended into chaos. But the tragic imprint was already sealed in television history. The cruel irony was undeniable. A man whose comedy poked fun at mortality was overtaken by it in front of his peers. Fox's passing left Hollywood in shock. Beyond his signature humor, he was celebrated for his sharp wit and for breaking barriers in television during an era when opportunities for black comedians were limited. His rise from gritty stand-up clubs to primetime stardom made him a trailblazer. In the end, Red Fox's final moment was like his comedy itself, unexpected, raw, and unforgettable, forever entwining his life and art. Brandon Lee. Sometimes the stage isn't a theater, it's a film set. And sometimes, the illusion is far more dangerous than the script. Actor Brandon Lee, son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee, was on the verge of breaking free from his father's shadow in 1993. His starring role in The Crow, a dark and atmospheric comic book adaptation, was meant to cement his stardom. But instead, it became the setting for one of Hollywood's most infamous tragedies. During the filming of a scene in which his character is attacked, Lee's co-star fired what was supposed to be a harmless prop revolver. Unbeknownst to anyone, a fragment of a real bullet had remained lodged in the gun barrel from a previous mishap. When the blank was fired, the fragment was propelled with deadly force. At first, many on set thought Brandon's collapse was part of the choreography. After all, they were filming a violent scene. But confusion quickly turned into horror as the seriousness became clear. Crew members rushed in, but despite desperate efforts, Lee never regained consciousness. The incident rattled Hollywood to its core. The eerie connection to his father's untimely death only deepened the tragedy and fueled myths around the Lee family. The Crow was ultimately completed using body doubles and early CGI, transforming it into both a cult classic and a cinematic gravestone for its star. Lee's death forced sweeping changes in how prop weapons were handled in Hollywood, with new rules on safety protocols. For Brandon Lee, the role that should have made him immortal instead sealed his legacy as one of film's most tragic losses. Leslie Harvey. For some rock stars, danger doesn't come from the crowd or lifestyle, but from the very instrument in their hands. Scottish guitarist Leslie Harvey, co-founder of the blues rock band Stone the Crows, was known for his fiery stage presence and inventive playing. On May 3, 1972, while performing in Swansea, Wales, Harvey's passion for live music collided with a freak accident. As the band prepared to launch into their next song, Harvey reached for a microphone. What he didn't know was that it hadn't been properly grounded. The moment he touched it, a surge of electricity traveled through his guitar and body. For a frozen instant, the audience and even his bandmates thought it was part of the act, an electrifying flourish in the middle of a set. But quickly, the horrifying truth emerged. Despite frantic efforts, Harvey could not be saved. He was only 27 years old, joining the grim roll call of the so-called 27 Club, alongside legends like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison. His death reverberated through the rock world, not only for the tragedy of losing a young talent, but also for the spotlight it threw on safety failures at venues. Promoters and clubs began to re-examine stage equipment and electrical standards. Fans remember Harvey not only for the shocking way he died, but for the electrifying energy with which he lived. His guitar was meant to amplify his brilliance, but instead, it became the stage that silenced him forever. Mark Sandman. Sometimes, the last note a musician plays becomes their farewell to the world. Mark Sandman, frontman of the alternative rock band Morphine, was no ordinary musician. Known for his smoky baritone and unique two-string slide bass, Sandman helped craft a sound that was dark, hypnotic, and utterly unlike anything else in the 1990s. His music was as moody as it was mesmerizing. On July 3, 1999, Morphine was performing at the Giardini del Principe in Palestrina, Italy. Midway through a song, Sandman suddenly leaned forward and collapsed. At first, the band kept playing, assuming it was one of his dramatic flourishes. Sandman was, after all, a performer who thrived on intensity. The crowd cheered, believing it was all part of the act, but the cheers soon gave way to confusion. Bandmates dropped their instruments and rushed to him as panic spread across the stage. Despite rapid attempts to revive him, Sandman never rose again. His sudden passing stunned fans around the world. Morphine had been on the cusp of wider fame, poised to break into the mainstream while still maintaining their cult credibility. Instead, the band's journey ended that night, their frontman forever tied to the haunting soundscapes he created. Fans often describe Sandman's passing as one of those "where were you when you heard?" moments in alternative rock. For Mark Sandman, the stage was both his sanctuary and his farewell, the place where his final note lingered long after the music stopped. Tiny Tim. Some performers never stop giving their all, even when their bodies beg them to. Quirky musician Tiny Tim, famous for his falsetto rendition of Tiptoe Through the Tulips and ever-present ukulele, had a career filled with eccentric performances. By the 1990s, his health was declining, but his devotion to the stage never wavered. On November 30th, 1996, he appeared at a benefit event in Minneapolis. Despite warnings from doctors to avoid strenuous performances, Tiny Tim insisted on playing. Halfway through his signature number, he began to falter. His wife, seated in the audience, rushed to his side as he collapsed. Tortam. First, many thought it was another one of his dramatic flourishes. After all, Tiny Tim loved surprising his audiences. But the atmosphere quickly shifted. The crowd realized they weren't watching a gag. They were witnessing a farewell. He was carried off, but those present knew they had seen something unforgettable. A man literally giving everything he had to his music. Tiny Tim's eccentric legacy made him a cult icon, and the surreal nature of his passing added another layer to his mythos. His ukulele may have gone silent, but Tiny Tim's final note was pure dedication to the art that defined his life. Owen Hart. Sometimes the spectacle of live entertainment becomes too dangerous to control. Professional wrestler Owen Hart, a fan favorite in the WWF, was scheduled for a dramatic stunt on May 23, 1999 in Kansas City. The plan was theatrical. Hart, in his blue blazer persona, would descend from the rafters on a harness, parodying superhero entrances. But as he was lowered into the packed arena, disaster struck. The harness malfunctioned, and Hart fell before the stunned crowd. At first, many spectators thought it was part of the storyline. After all, professional wrestling often blurred fiction and reality. But the silence from officials and the frantic rush of medics revealed the truth. Hart's passing was a seismic shock to wrestling fans worldwide. He wasn't just another wrestler. He was a beloved figure from a legendary wrestling family. His accident forced the industry to re-examine the balance between spectacle and safety, and his name is still spoken with reverence among fans. Owen Hart's tragedy is remembered as one of wrestling's darkest nights, a painful lesson in the risks of entertainment gone too far. Mitsuharu Misawa. In Japan, pro wrestling isn't just theater, it's a brutal blend of art and endurance. Legendary wrestler Mitsuharu Misawa was a cornerstone of Japanese wrestling, admired for his toughness and technical skill. On June 13, 2009, he entered a tag team match in Hiroshima. For fans, watching Misawa wrestle was like witnessing a national treasure at work. Mid-match, he took a high-impact move, a back suplex, that went wrong. Misawa lay motionless on the mat as the referee and medics swarmed. The audience, trained to expect dramatic injuries as part of wrestling's rhythm, didn't grasp the gravity at first. But as the minutes passed, the truth became undeniable. Misawa had given his life to the sport, literally on the canvas where he had become a legend. His passing devastated Japan's wrestling community, which revered him as both a hero and a symbol of resilience. The incident sparked ongoing debates about the extreme physical demands placed on wrestlers, where the line between performance and punishment can blur fatally. For Misawa, the ring wasn't just a workplace, it became his final resting stage. Crisis. For some artists, the stage is more than performance. It's a safe haven. A sanctuary. Drag performer Crisis, a New York City nightlife star in the 1980s, was celebrated for dramatic costumes and larger-than-life presence. One evening during a cabaret show, Crisis collapsed mid-performance. At first, attendees assumed it was a piece of avant-garde theater, since the underground drag scene often thrived on shock and surrealism. But the collapse wasn't art. It was real. The audience sat stunned as the performer was carried away, never regaining consciousness. The loss of Crisis sent ripples through New York's LGBTQ+ community, where drag was not just entertainment, but resistance, visibility, and pride. Crisis's untimely death reminded everyone of the physical toll that relentless performing can take, especially in a scene that demanded constant reinvention and energy. Though not as widely remembered in mainstream culture, Crisis remains a legend in drag history, a reminder that even underground icons can shine brightly enough to leave lasting impressions. Their final curtain fell on stage, but their influence still dances in the memories of those who saw them live. Leonard Warren. Opera thrives on tragedy, but rarely does the drama spill into reality so completely. On March 4, 1960, baritone Leonard Warren, one of the Metropolitan Opera's greatest voices, was performing La Forza del Destino in New York. The role demanded soaring, emotional power, and Warren delivered it flawlessly. As he reached the climactic aria, Morir, tremenda cosa, to die, a momentous thing, the words hung in the air with eerie force. Moments later, Warren collapsed mid-stage, shocking fellow performers and the packed house. At first, many thought it was a bold interpretation of his character's death. But soon, reality set in. The aria had been his final statement. The Met canceled the performance, the audience leaving in stunned silence. Opera critics later called it one of the most surreal moments in music history, an artist embodying tragedy so completely that the fiction became real. Warren's legacy only grew after his passing. He was remembered not only for his extraordinary voice, but also for the haunting way his final performance blurred the line between role and reality. In Leonard Warren's case, art truly imitated life, and life imitated art, on the grandest stage of them all. Eric Morecambe. Some performers give so much of themselves that even their curtain call becomes a farewell. In the UK, few comedy duos were as beloved as Morecambe and Wise. Eric Morecambe, with his sharp glasses and quick-fire wit, had become a national treasure by the 1980s. Known for clean humor and warm rapport with audiences, he embodied the very best of British television comedy. On May 28, 1984, Eric was performing at a charity show in Tewkesbury. He had the crowd in stitches, delivering jokes with the same effortless charm that had made him a household name. After finishing the set, he returned to the stage for an encore, took a bow, and waved one last time. Then, behind the curtain, he collapsed. To the audience, the show had ended perfectly. They had no idea what was happening just out of sight. Fellow performers rushed to his side, but the legendary comedian was gone. The news stunned the UK. Morecambe wasn't just a comedian, he was a cultural icon, someone whose Christmas specials and TV shows had brought entire families together. His passing left a void that no one could fill, and even today, his work is remembered as a golden standard for British comedy. The tragedy carried an eerie poetry. A man who had spent his life bowing to laughter and applause gave his very last bow on stage. For Eric Morecambe, the spotlight never truly faded. His final act was both a goodbye and a gift to the audience that adored him. J.Y. Rodale. Sometimes, the most unexpected stage isn't a theater or a concert hall, it's a television studio. In 1971, health food advocate J.Y. Rodale, founder of Prevention magazine, was invited onto the Dick Cavett Show. Known for preaching the benefits of natural living, Rodale often boasted about his vitality and long life expectancy. That night, in front of a studio audience, he made a declaration that stunned viewers. "I'm in such good health, I expect to live to be 100. Moments later, while another guest was being interviewed, Rodale slumped in his chair. The audience thought he was joking. After all, Cavett's show often featured eccentric personalities, but silence fell as staff rushed in and realized what had happened. The taping was never aired, but word spread quickly. The man who championed wellness had met his end during a live broadcast. The irony was undeniable, and the incident became one of the most infamous unscreened moments in television history. Rodale's passing served as a sobering reminder that life doesn't follow scripts, even for those who think they've mastered its rules. Harry Einstein. Comedy roasts are supposed to end in laughter, not silence. Veteran comedian Harry Einstein, better known to radio fans as Parkyakarkus, had built his career on quick wit and lovable, bumbling humor. On November 23, 1958, he joined a star-studded Friars Club roast for Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz in Los Angeles. The ballroom was packed with Hollywood royalty, including Milton Berle, George Burns, and Dean Martin. Einstein delivered a flawless routine, his timing sharp, his punchlines landing perfectly. The audience roared with laughter and applause. When he finished, he basked in the ovation, smiling as he sat down beside Milton Berle. Moments later, Berle leaned over and realized something was wrong. Einstein had slumped in his chair. At first, many in the crowd thought it was another gag. After all, comedians lived on surprise. But the truth hit like a wave. Chaos erupted as stars rushed to help. George Burns and Tony Martin reportedly tried to assist until doctors in the audience stepped in. Despite frantic efforts, Harry Einstein never left the ballroom alive. The tragedy haunted Hollywood. Comedians who lived by timing and punchlines were shaken by the suddenness of the moment. His son, future actor and comedian Albert Brooks, would later reflect on the surreal legacy of having a father who literally died making people laugh. Harry Einstein's final act was pure comedy brilliance, followed instantly by a silence that proved life's cruelest punchline. Ken Steadman. Television can demand as much danger as a live stage, sometimes with fatal consequences. In 1996, actor Ken Steadman, best known for his role in the sci-fi series Sliders, was filming on location in California. During a scene involving a dune buggy, he volunteered to drive the vehicle across rough terrain. But the moment turned catastrophic when the buggy overturned. Crew members rushed in, many believing it was part of the chaotic action scene being filmed. But reality struck hard. This wasn't scripted. Despite emergency efforts, Steadman didn't survive the accident. At just 27 years old, his passing devastated fans of Sliders, a cult show already beloved for its bold storytelling. The incident also cast a harsh light on the risks actors face on set, especially when safety protocols are stretched thin for the sake of realism. Ken Steadman's final scene was never meant for the cameras, but it left behind one of the most tragic footnotes in 1990s television. The stage has always been a place of magic, where applause drowns out reality and performance feels eternal. But as these haunting stories show, even legends can meet their final moment under the spotlight. Which of these stories stunned you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable histories, because when the curtain falls, one question always lingers. How much of life itself is just a performance?